Poisonburst Pathfinder is pretty much everywhere right now. It looks incredible, and it raises everything from screens away. But here's what most guys won't tell you. If you start this build the way they recommend, like starting the build too early, it feels like the damage stalls, your currency disappears, and you start wondering why everyone else is having fun except you. So instead of giving you a POB and a list of trust me bro skills and passives, we are doing this differently. I'm going to show you how to level Poisonburst safely from level 1, how to scale it into the endgame without wasting currency, how to pivot this build into bleed for screen-wide explosions, and most importantly, how to avoid common pitfalls that will kill your character before you see it shine, with no spreadsheet brain required. I'm also going to link a clean, step-by-step mobalytics guide as a companion, so you can easily follow along without having to rewatch this video a dozen times. Now, let's build this thing the smart way. Okay, let's get this out of the way early. Poison is actually not the goal of this build, at least not at the start. And that is the first mental trap most people fall into. You see, most people look at Poisonburst arrow popping off in endgame clips and assume the move is to rush poison scaling the moment they create their character. But in reality early on, using Poisonburst like that is basically trying to run before you can walk. Poisonburst arrow scales off layers that simply don't exist yet early in the campaign. You're missing key passives, ascendancy power, element consistency, and most importantly, a good weapon to make the Poisonburst shine. Now how do we actually build this thing? Well, the first step is to forget about poison altogether. This is because even though you can get Poisonburst arrow as one of your first skill gems, it severely lacks hit damage, and the toxic growth skill, which is borderline mandatory to play this build early, is not available to you until you beat the executioner towards the end of Act 1. And even once you unlock toxic growth, you still don't have enough damage to carry you. So instead of forcing poison early, use the tried and true lightning arrow plus lightning rod combo instead. This gives you a decent chunk of front loaded damage, smooth clears, and zero friction against early bosses. You can even pair with Contagion to effortlessly clear packs, and add Herald of Thunder as your first spirit gem to cruise comfortably well into the end of Act 2. You also want to make sure you complete all necessary optional encounters to grab some much needed damage passive nodes, and go to town every level or 2 to look for flat physical or lightning damage bow. This is especially important in Act 2, where around level 16, you unlock the recurve bow that will surely double your damage even with a mediocre roll. Oh, and while you are the vendor, keep an eye out for movement speed boots and flat damage on rings and gloves. These small upgrades do more for you in the early game than any early poison investment ever would. The following regex should help with this, and I'm going to link it in the mobalytics guide as well. This is how you get through the early game cleanly without fighting the build before it's ready to shine.
マジ元気ピンピンだよ。
こいつハイになってる。
The first meaningful moment when poison actually becomes worth playing is when you get your first ascendancy points from the Trial of Sekemas. You can get this completed as early as level 21 if you experience, but I recommend waiting until the end of Act 2, like right before going to the Dreadnought to fight Jamunra. This is where you unlock overwhelming toxicity, and here is why that ascendancy node changes everything. See at its core, poison is a damaging element that deals chaos damage over time, and is applied by a hit. Now the important part is, the base damage of poison scales off the physical and chaos damage of that hit, And that is exactly why poison feels bad early on. You simply don't have enough physical or chaos damage yet, and you're only applying one stack of poison by default. Overwhelming toxicity fixes all of that. It literally doubles the number of poison stacks you can apply to a target, and that's before you factor in the extra stacks we grab from passives and support gems. In practice, this is 100% more damage multiplier against bosses and anything that doesn't instantly die. This is the breakpoint we've been waiting for. Your single target damage basically doubles overnight. Jamara, who usually makes people question their life choices, suddenly behaves. And now poison finally starts feeling like a real damage mechanic instead of a gimmick. From this point on, the build stops fighting you and start working with you. With that breakpoint achieved, time to finally flip the poison switch. You grab Poisonburst Arrow as your main skill. On its own though, it's not quite as strong enough to carry you, and that's expected. The real power comes when you layer Toxic Growth on top. Here's how the combo works. Poison Growth is going to plant pods that don't do anything by themselves, but the moment those pods get poisoned, they burst like piñatas, dealing a massive chunk of damage. And by now, you are already used to the Lightning Arrow and Lightning Rod playstyle, so mechanically, this is not going to feel any different. Now that setup is going to clear packs just fine, but for bosses, we need more oomph and something more reliable. So this is where Gas Arrow enters the chat. Gas Arrow pretty much automates the Toxic Growth interaction. So all you need to do is fire Gas Arrow, then spam Toxic Growth into it, and the pods poison and detonate consistently. No more awkward setups, no more praying for triggers. And this works beautifully for crowd control too. But we ain't done yet. Grab the Despair to reduce enemy chaos resistance by up to 47%, which is effectively a huge poison damage multiplier. Swap Herald of Thunder for Herald of Plague to get easy poison proliferation and smoother map clear. And if you're feeling frisky, you can add Dark Effigy for passive chaos damage on bosses while you focus on bursting them down. On the passive tree, prioritize Toxin nodes. These increase poison magnitude and let you apply more poison stacks, which directly scales everything we're doing right now. This setup should easily carry you through the Jimanra fight, and as soon as you enter Act 3, be sure to swing by the Orok Campfire to grab your first Jeweler's Orb. Use it on Toxic Growth first, as it gives you the biggest immediate damage bump when you slot Deadly Poison into it. Then around level 39, time to get yourself a Zealot Bow. The flat physical damage alone on this baby is a massive DPS spike, since physical damage directly scales poison damage. If you already have a solid bow though, you can wait until level 45 for an artillery bow, which has even higher physical damage potential. This is when the build stops feeling scuffed, but just because the build works now, doesn't mean it wants every upgrade immediately. You're still in a fragile state here, and the goal is stability before bloodlust. Once the Poisonburst Arrow plus Toxin Growth combo becomes your main clearing tool, the build's identity really starts to show. This is where poison proliferation enters the picture. Poison spreads, packs chain react with poison into each other, enemies start dying off screen, and for the first time, the build actually feels smooth instead of crappy. Now once you hit Act 4, unlock asynchronous trading, and you got a bit of currency lying in your pocket, this is usually where people get themselves into trouble, myself included, because suddenly everything starts looking like an upgrade. But before you start throwing your hard-earned currency around, let's talk about what actually matters right now. If you watch my beginner tips video, then you already know your weapon carries most of your damage. The problem is, bows can be a very expensive investment, especially if you don't know whether what you're buying is actually an upgrade. Unless you're a full-time path of building Enjoy, of course. So the safest play here is Silvertongue. This bow is criminally underestimated, usually going for around 1 exalt at the time of this recording. And it does everything this build wants. It gives you a massive crit chance boost, which directly scales poison. It turns one arrow into two after hitting a target. It can pierce for smoother mapping. And on top of all that, it fixes your mana issues by leeching mana on hit. This is hands down the best value investment you can make at this stage, and is going to comfortably carry you through the rest of the campaign, then easily into tier 15 maps. Even better yet, it has a low level requirement, which means you can equip it as early as level 39 in Act 3 if you manage to find one or trade for one. After that, start shoring up your defenses, cap as many resistances as you can, upgrade to a 25% movement speed boost, and if you haven't already, now is the perfect time to upgrade your quiver. Just remember that damage isn't your problem anymore. You have more than enough firepower to finish the campaign. What will slow you down is dying every 5 seconds. So upgrade where you need to, save currency where you can, and cruise your way into maps without sabotaging yourself right before the finish line. By the time mapping starts, you should be feeling really good about your damage by now. Poisonburst arrow is one tapping trash. Toxic growth erases rares. Packs die before they even realize you're there. As you push into higher map tiers though, you're going to notice something shift. Your kills start taking a little longer. Your clear slows down just enough to feel off. And this is where endgame decision making actually begins. This is unfortunately where most people look at YouTubers' insane gear and wonder how they can even compete with how much those upgrades cost. I mean, a bow upgrade alone at this stage with high item level will easily cost you a butt cheek. And even something as simple as a DPS ring with double resistances can cost you a liver. But here's what most people don't realize. You don't need the most expensive item in the game to feel powerful. So instead of chasing a cracked DPS bow, all you need is a Vortaxic Rift. This is another one of those bows that is insanely efficient for its price, like usually well under a divine, and it does something huge for this build. It converts all lightning damage on your gear into chaos damage, which means every bit of lightning on your rings, gloves, or quiver now scales your poison directly. On top of that, it guarantees shock application, so enemies take even more damage across the board. Now if you're coming from Sliver Tongue, you're going to notice your crit chance drops a bit. But don't panic, my brother. See, the thing is, poison builds care far less about crit than pure hit builds. And poison applies so many hit and so many stacks that crits still happen even more often than not. Pair this with shock on top, and this bow can genuinely compete with bows most people are dumping their life savings into. Now let's talk about bait gear upgrade. A lot of players rush to play fingers here because they see them in every Poison Pathfinder setup. And yes, it can be good, but only if your gear actually supports them. Look man, we all love expensive shiny things, but the truth is, Plague Fingers only matter if you're running elemental damage sources. If your gear is mostly physical or chaos, they do absolutely nothing for you. And those 2 divines you spent on them? You should have sent me those instead. So if you are running something like Vortaxic Rift, or already have elemental damage on your gear, and money to spare, then by all means, Plague Fingers will do you well. Otherwise, a cheaper pair of gloves with high physical damage, mana leech, resistances, or crit multi is going to outperform them every single time. Then finally, do not grief yourself into using Rislata's coil together with Plague Fingers. Guys, this is such a classic damage trap. See, Rislata massively boosts physical damage, while Plague Fingers pushes you towards elemental scaling. These 2 things are obviously pulling the build in opposite directions. So here's the rule of thumb. If you are heavily invested into physical damage, then Rislata is dope. If you're converting into elemental or chaos scaling, Plague Fingers will work for you. But never run both together. Alright, with the endgame upgrade traps out of the way, it's time to talk about the secret sauce that takes this build's map clear to ballistic level.
お前こんなの初めてだ。わかるか。なあ、僕の敵。
Now this is where most Poisonburst arrow guys completely lose the plot. They're going to casually mention to just add bleed for more damage, show some cool explosions, and move on. But nah, bleed is not here to replace poison. It's not even here to carry boss damage. And it's definitely not here because bleed is secretly overpowered. Bleed exists in this build for only one reason: clear efficiency. Think of poison as the fire spreading through a forest. Slow, inevitable, devastating over time. Bleed, on the other hand, is the oxygen tank hiding in that forest. It doesn't start the fire, but when fire reaches it, and here is the interaction most people never explain clearly. Poisonburst arrow deals physical damage, and that physical damage can bleed. Now by forcing consistent bleed application on Poisonburst, usually through a bleed support gem, every enemy you hit now carries both ailments. Then we introduce the Herald. Herald of Plague spreads poison when enemies die. Herald of Blood causes explosions when bleeding enemies die. Now combine all that with the Admixture support gem, and suddenly enemies take more damage if they are bleeding. Then they take more bleed damage if they are poisoned. And when they die, they explode, spreading both ailments even further. So in practice, what actually happens looks like this. Poison kills something, that enemy bleeds and explodes, the explosion poisons nearby enemies, those nearby enemies start bleeding, they explode in turn, and the chain keeps going. That's why packs die around corners. That's why enemies you never even targeted disappear. And that is exactly why the build feels completely different once bleed is online. Remember back in the days where Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice were doing unholy things and blowing up screens away with minimum investment? This feels surprisingly similar. Best part is, you don't even need to change your gear setup or sink thousands of gold into respecting your passive tree. If you leveled up correctly to this point, the bleed pivot is almost laughably easy. You're not rebuilding your character. You simply add in a Herald and a support gem on top of what already works, and letting the feedback loop do the rest. Here is the underrated part of the Poisonburst Pathfinder. It's not just strong, it's forgiving. You're not relying on burst windows. You're not executing perfect rotations. You're not gambling on crits or panic casting to survive. And your damage doesn't happen because you're frantically pressing buttons. It simply happens because enemies made the mistake of existing near you. And Pathfinder gives you the mobility, the sustain, and the poison immunity to keep moving while all that work gets done for you. This, yes this my friend, is why the build scales so well into maps and into higher tier content. So if you only take one thing away from this guide, let it be this. Poisonburst Pathfinder is not weak early. It's simply more patient than you are. If you rush it, it punishes you. If you respect its timing, it rewards you with one of the smoothest, safest, fastest, and most satisfying clear engines in POE2. If this breakdown helped you, drop a like and share it with anyone who's struggling to make this build click. Subscribe for more cinematic guides and breakdown, and if you got questions, leave them in the comments. I read and respond to every single one of them. Then until we meet again, stay stylish, stay untouchable, and may your crits always be juicy.